I am a managing member of ForSight Labs, which is an ophthalmic incubator started 10 years ago with my partner, Jean Dewan. We have started drug delivery companies. I also run ForSight Vision 4, which is the delivery of therapeutics to the back of the eye. So I understand the challenges here, and I want to just take a moment to say how much work you all have been doing over the, I mean, it's very impressive. I mean, phase 3s, multiple phase 2s, and I think it really reflects the interest in this space, but also maybe some challenges that we'll get into.
So thank you, Emmett, for inviting me to participate in this panel. I am Kristen Hebraic from Wilson Sonsini Goodrich Rosati. I'm a patent attorney, so hopefully I'll be offering a intellectual property perspective on the materials we talk about here. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
Great. Well, I think one of the questions that comes up for me, and maybe each of you of the company presenters could kind of give me a sense of the choice between non-invasive and invasive, and kind of what's the tipping point in the market, whether it be from a pricing perspective or the patient acceptance perspective, that would lead you to go inside the eye versus on the eye. And I know that everyone kind of deals with the technology that they have, but what are the drivers around that? And they seem to me to be very, very different based on my understanding in ophthalmology and how things work. Maybe, David, you could lead us off with inside the eye, really? Or topical, if it works, why not?
Well, I don't, can you hear? Yep. Well, our lead product, you know, is I mean, technically it's an injectable, but we actually don't use a needle. We use a blunt cannula because the product is applied, you know, for cataract surgery right at the very end once the surgery is complete. So, you know, the experience that's been garnered to date, the physicians have had obviously a very good experience, and to the best of our knowledge, the patients have really, we've had many patients requesting, can I come back and get the other eye done? I think where we will face a little bit of a challenge is, of course, the payment setting and the fact that we are in the surgery center. So that's something that, you know, we're very aware of and something that will have to be dealt with over the course of time. And if no one can predict our dear friends at CMS and how the winds of fortune can actually, you know, blow, but if we can end up getting a separate payment coverage over a longer duration, we think that the product will be very well accepted, payment covered in the surgery center setting.
So Amar, you have technology that can really be applied, I guess, in multiple ways with the punctum plugs, which you are essentially non-invasive. What's kind of the decision making when you look at your platform relative to where you're going to put it? Is it duration? Is it acceptance to physicians, patients? What drives that?
Can you hear me?
No.
Hello? Okay. So I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is, what are you trying to treat? And then the question of sort of, will an invasive solution be acceptable in that? I think if you're trying to treat something which, for example, pain, which may be on the ocular surface more so, or ocular surface discomfort or things of that nature, it actually doesn't make sense to take a more invasive approach. You would like to have it dispensed on the tear film so it can be reach the target tissues. The second is that if you are doing things which can be administered during surgery, then I think you could take either approach, although, as mentioned, there could be some reimbursement challenges because you're confined to that. On the other hand, if you are able to place this in the chair, for example, for allergic conjunctivitis for us, you know, that would be a chair-based kind of a procedure. You want to keep things general so that one product can do multiple things and have more reimbursement options. So that goes into our decision-making. With glaucoma, when we look at that, we convened a panel of physicians asking them, saying, what do you think about this? And, you know, 90% of them basically said that we would like to have, currently drops are non-invasive, we'd like to have non-invasive options. A few of them, 10% said, you know, a needle might be okay, but when their peers queried them saying, would you accept a needle? Would you accept a needle? The opinion rapidly changed. surprisingly.
Yeah.
So that I think, when our approaches don't take a step backward before you can deliver some promise forward. So
That's
if
a
you
good way
take
to
a
put
step
it.
backward, for example, going for the glaucoma to invasive approaches, or for the back of the eye to a pump, for example, or those types of approaches, that is a surgical approach instead of a needle. So one more step of becoming more invasive, it becomes reluctant because nobody admits that they're not compliant. They like to say that they're compliant. I'll comply with drops, don't poke me.
Right. So, Charlie, you're a better drop, and I think, my perspective is a little bit that ophthalmic companies, depending on your strategy, particularly larger ophthalmic companies, really want to have drops to sell if they can be better or they can actually show efficacy. So, what's a little bit behind your strategy of being a drop, particularly in back of the eye disease, because that seems challenging.
Yeah, so I think depending on, each indication, you have to really look at all by itself. You gotta look at the population, you gotta look at what your competitor's doing, you gotta look at, is your technology gonna succeed? And you have to look at the reimbursement landscape, the payer landscape, what other meds are they on? So, when we went after postoperative inflammation, and this was during the fundraising era when we had no clinical data, people said, okay, you're just doing that for proof of concept. But if you really look at the history of both Lotemax and Durezol, and if you look at a lot of the recent dramatic price increases in both brandeds and particularly generics, it's a really important market for a very small company like us. It's really a standalone market. So, and I just think making our enhanced penetration, not just beyond the cornea, but into some of the other tissues of the eye, particularly as we look at dry eye. We just recently had our advisory board meeting, and they really understood the inflammation isn't coming from the cornea, it's showing up on the cornea, but it's coming from somewhere else. And then when you get into the deeper tissues of the eye, like with our tyrosine kinase inhibitor program, everybody knows monthly injections or every other month injections. Well, they're going to be here. I mean, the VEGFs work really well, the biologics. However, there needs to be other options, and there needs to be other kinds of molecules. There needs to be other delivery mechanisms to manage those patients, and that's where we intend to go in. But we've been spending most of our time engineering the right selectivity profile rather than just borrowing compounds from oncology and things like hitting KDR but not hitting EGFR. We believe are very important, as important as the delivery system.
Yeah. So with Envisia, Envisia Icon, like how do I choose? I'm doing post-op cataract or I'm doing glaucoma. Which is the best platform? So kind of what differentiates you in that arena? It's maybe a pointed question, but.
Well, obviously I'm biased, so I think we have a great platform here. I do want to get back to your previous question, though, real quick on invasiveness. And I think in a non-surgical setting, like in glaucoma, when we think about intracameral, we need to have that performance and durability to warrant that kind of level of invasiveness. Something more like 3 months might be better for subconj, but for something intracameral, we think 6 months is more like the appropriate target. So, I don't know, getting back to your previous question, but I'm not up for a dogfight.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to pursue one of these questions a little bit more, if I might, and that is a generics market, a crowded market there. You're all going after postoperative inflammation. There are other drugs for postoperative inflammation, and for one drug, it may be a great market for a small company. Why are you not worried about 7 new entrants for that indication? And so sort of explain how I know Mark can't say this because he hasn't said it publicly, but how do you think about what share of market you're going to be able to capture, even if, let's assume you're all approved? What's your assumption that you can, Charlie, how much do you assume your peak revenue will be if there are 7 or 5 new agents on the market for postoperative inflammation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've spent a lot of time recently preparing for my last board meeting to address that question. And I think, first of all, not everybody's going to make it. That's just never happens. So, and if you look at the large players like, Alcon, Allergan, Bausch & Lomb, and you look at the patent landscape and that kind of thing, they're really not going to be participating in the market in the long run, just from what I can see, unless they start doing more deals. So that's it's a very promotion-sensitive market as well. You know, Durezol was an amazing story. Alcon built that up to 30% of the market. It's doing $130 million US alone. And they did that when they didn't have really any differentiation from generics. If you look at the label, you know, if you compare prednisolone with Durezol on label, there's really, and that was when they were 10 times the price of generics. Now generics are selling for close to $100, and some of the branded are selling for $190. So we priced our first model where generics are already, so we had to redo it. So we don't need a very large part of that market. I think no company will take more than 20% of the market. That's just my assumption.
What's the total size of the market today? What is the total postoperative inflammation market? Does anyone know? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I don't know.
If you include non-steroidals, you see some analyst figures that put it close to $2 billion. But I think the steroid drops, you're probably looking at sort of about $700-800 million.
Okay, great. Charlie, I wanted to just clarify because I wasn't sure from your presentation. Your drops, steroid drops that are muco-adherent.
Muco-penetrating.
Muco-penetrating, even better. So one drop, is it once dosing that lasts for the entire postoperative period? What was the dosing regimen?
Yeah, so this is a BID product versus most of the products today are QID. And it is, what we see is we enhance Cmax and AUC. We have other approaches that enhance residence time, and that's usually mixing with the polymer. But this is pure drug crystal. It's enhancing penetration. That's all we're doing with this particular, mode of our MPP technology.
Got it. I'll ask one more, and then I'll switch back to you if that's okay.
Great.
So we have we have two patent attorneys up here actually today. You're a patent attorney, right, Angela? Is that? No? Attorney, but not patent attorney.
I'm a
okay.
business person.
We clearly have one patent attorney up
Who
here
knows
today.
too much about that.
And, this is sort of Brahms. This is the variations on a theme. Or Bach. Tell me, when these companies must come to you by the many, if not dozens, that have a new platform to deliver drugs. And I know Wilson, I've worked with Wilson closely, and I know they see a lot of the eye companies. When you're sort of sitting down to counsel someone who has a new drug delivery approach, especially in light of the American Invest Act, how do you think about, what do you hope they've done? What are the things you focus on to give them the most protection and freedom to operate? In 2 words or less.
The basic tenets still apply. You have to have freedom to operate, and you have to have a long runway. So if your core technology is patented already, and you need to be thinking about what else am I going to try to cover and protect, more commercial embodiments or whatever it is to extend your runway. The FDA procedure is long, it takes a long time. Your drug may be going off patent, so you need to think about that. But what the American Invents Act does for you is provide new opportunities for you to do this. So, for example, there are expedited examination pathways that you can take which get you patent coverage within a year, or at least get you a final decision on a new filing. So you can have a good reading on your coverage for your newer concepts, or if it's your first patent out, you can get a good read on that initially within a year theoretically. That might even be before it publishes. So that's a fabulous opportunity for a new company to think about being able to sell themselves to potential investors, saying, okay, well, of the 2 parts you need, freedom to operate and coverage, let me show you some data from an examining body that says, hey, you've got coverage. And then with respect to freedom to operate, you have to be strategically thinking about who is in your field. You have to know who's out there. In inflammation, it's crowded. You have to know who are the big players and what their patents landscape looks like. And knowing that, you can also possibly take advantage of some of the new post-grant examination procedures that exist, or review procedures that exist now after the American Invents Act. Which
talk about not everyone surviving. It is becoming more like cage fighting than company building
It
these
is,
days.
yes. So, I mean, you have to think about those opportunities after grants of your competitors' patents to possibly get within a year or a year and a half an invalidating decision on their patents. So those are some opportunities that I see and that most companies should be thinking of that are sort of different than maybe in the past you would have thought of.
Is it fair to say that most of the IP that protects you, that avoids others from coming, is really sort of delivery vehicle based? It's based on the proprietary vehicle and not on the use or the thing you put in it?
Right. I think it's definitely the vehicle that the base drugs. I mean, you were talking about dexamethasone. We're talking about these are drugs that we've seen for a long time. So it's really the vehicle. It's how it's configured, maybe how it's manufactured. Use of it is not as helpful sometimes, but you can get those claims usually too. But it's usually the vehicle and maybe the polymer or how it's put together.
Yeah, so instead of a Shark Tank, maybe next year should be cage fighting of the drug delivery companies because we don't even have them all up here. And I think what I would like to close with, if we really only have 3 or 4 minutes, is I know you talked about in boardrooms and what have you, kind of your vision for why your company would, I suppose I could say go public or sell, but Amar, you're going to wreck this question because you're already public and being very successful at it. But what are the things that you think are the tipping point about your technology for a strategic acquisition? This is what kind of the elephant in the room a lot of times. And you can maybe have 2 words, but I would say, is it duration? Is it modality? Is it to have something in someone's bag, i.e. it's a product for someone? Is it breakthrough clinical data? Is it breadth of platform? And you can't say all, like what's your primary, like in your heart, what do you say when you say I'm getting up every day and I know I'm going to be successful because my technology blank? David.
Well, in terms of our technology and our lead product, it really has to be the unprecedented efficacy that we've seen with...
So clinical data.
Absolutely. The
Yeah,
clinical
good.
data we believe is extremely stellar, and that's what has us most excited.
I mean, ours is,
How can you be more successful, Amar? I mean, I guess
well, ours is the broad applicability, I think, from small molecules to large front
So
of the eye
having
to
a
the back,
platform.
the entire platform, and a proven platform where, this is my 6th company on this. We put $400 million and I have 150 patents. So we can talk about
So
patents.
I want you up here next year. So Charlie, is it the ophthalmology loves drops and they love better drops? What do you think is your tipping point?
This is if you're a drug delivery company, you have to have IP, and you basically have to raise enough money in a crowded field to make a product. And when it's a product, then people will listen to your whole technology story and how you're going to break through and innovate. So in our
get
case,
a product, yeah.
we're addressing a market that's well defined, but when we have more success in dry eye, we can build a very large company standalone, and that's what we intend to do.
Wow, okay, take it all the way.
I think for us, it's really about the right drug in the right place at the right release rate. And if you get that right, you get really remarkable performance in terms of safety and efficacy. So looking for those opportunities to create products that completely outperform the current paradigm is what we're after.
Great, transformational. Do you think that you will have enough money to take multiple products forward, or are you going to have to end up choosing?
Yeah, we will. We've got great venture backers.
You
and
do.
Nothing like good clinical data to allow us to get more money.
Awesome. One more question, I think, Emmett.
Well, what I'd really like to understand, and it may be too nuanced for 46 seconds, is reimbursement and who pays. I understand if you're drops and you write a prescription, or if you're a punctal plug and you place it in the office, there are sort of predicates for that. For the agents that are injected in the OR, is it not folded into the entire cost of the procedure and or paid separately? Or you mentioned that there's a J-code. Is your anticipation, David, that that'll be billed separately from the...
Yeah, well, what I mentioned there was, certainly there's 2 principal fees. You've got the physician fee, and you've got the fee for the facility.
Right.
So a lot of the drugs go into that. There is a temporary transitional C code that we will get, which allows separate payment. For example, Omidria just received that, and they're getting paid separately. And the expectation then is that we would negotiate with CMS for separate payment coverage, i.e. we would get a J code and be able to demonstrate the clinical benefit, et cetera, and get a separate payment.
Okay, we are 17 seconds over, so I'm going to thank the panel for their presentations and comments, and Angela as well for co-moderating. Thank you.
Thanks, Emmett.